Hey, everybody. Welcome to Clear Path Leadercast. We're focusing some new ideas going forward. So, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Craig Anderson. I am the president of Clear Path Coaching and Consulting. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 tips that will help you go from being an accidental executive to a confident leader. So, what does all that mean, though? The term accidental executive. Sometimes I think I coined that term myself, although there is a book out on Amazon about it. So who knows? But I really came up through the ranks of corporate America, worked in Fortune 500 companies, and I've talked about that a lot. Led national sales teams for Fortune 500 companies, ran national divisions, grew a small business, and had a lot of success with those areas. But as I was coming up through my career, I was really struggling a lot with just becoming this corporate person. I have a English degree. I thought at one point I was going to be a teacher and then I was going to be a financial aid officer at a college or university. There was nothing in my game plan that told me, hey, I'm going to go be a bank executive or a financial services company executive. And I really didn't have the background. I have a degree in English. I have a master's in higher ed administration, which is very different than an MBA. I can tell you, we aren't looking at the same things in that program. So as I grew in my career, I was a great individual contributor. I ended up starting out in a sales role and did really well there. And as happens to salespeople who are really strong individual performers, they get promoted into leadership roles. And as much as I'd like to say companies do a fantastic job training people how to be leaders, the truth is they don't. Maybe you get lucky and you get a boss who's really got a coaching mindset or a mentoring mindset, and they kind of help you grow as a leader and help you solve some of these problems. But that's not always the case. And I didn't necessarily have that in all my jobs kind of growing up. And part of the reason for that is they probably didn't have anybody coaching and mentoring them either. So they are struggling. They're just doing the best they can given what tools and resources they had. And maybe they got lucky. So it's a really challenging thing to get into that first time leadership role. And people assume because you're a good individual contributor, thanks, Riley, you're going to be a good leader. And that's just not the case. Those skills are not always transferable. Now, sometimes bad sales reps are great leaders, sales leaders, and vice versa. And this isn't just in sales, right? This can be in any different position you're in operations and finance and accounting. You kind of come up, and even more so, a lot of people who maybe are fantastic architects. They spent a lot of time in college getting their architecture degree, or maybe they had a real passion for accounting and that's what they wanted to do, but they're successful and suddenly they find themselves running a business, but they don't necessarily have the tools or the background to learn how to lead effectively. And they certainly don't have any corporate resources that they might tap into because they're just a small business owner who's having a lot of success. So all of these things kind of come together into this idea that you become an accidental executive. You're just going along, doing your career, working as hard as you can, doing as well as you can do. And then suddenly you're in charge. And for a while that can work pretty well. Maybe it's just you and a couple of people, but as you grow, there's all these different things and different pressures that come on you to be a leader or an executive in the organization. And maybe you just kind of accidentally ended up there. I mean, look, guys, I took like 5 business classes in college. I think my best grade was a C. So this was just not my natural inclination. And so as I grew in this career for these big Fortune 500 companies, what I found was I'm sitting around the table with people with MBAs. And when I was at Chase, I'm sitting around the table with people from MBAs from very prestigious institutions. And here I'm just this guy. And I really struggled with just, why am I here? What the heck am I doing sitting around the table with these folks? The guy who reports to Jamie Dimon is sitting across the table from me. And I really struggled. Now, if you were looking at me from the outside, I looked very successful. I probably looked confident. I worked hard to do the things that I was doing, but inside I was really struggling with things like, how do I lead? I'm a person who doesn't like conflict. And, I saw any hard conversation I had to have with an employee as conflict. So I dreaded them and put them off. A lot of sleepless nights worrying about it, a lot of anxiety driving around it. So it was really a struggle for me to kind of move into this leadership role and this executive role. And that's something that I struggled with through a large chunk of my career until really much later on, I got my own executive coach who helped me to grow and learn some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. And I talk about in our group, the Clear Path Leaders Forum, where we put a lot of great content out there, even beyond these trainings. So you can join that group at clearpathcoaches.com/community. We'd love to have you in there and get you to be part of that community so we can talk to you more about these things. But today I want to talk about 3 things that were transformational for me and helped me become more successful and feel more confident and less stressed as an executive. And I want to share those things with you today. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. What I want to share with you today is, again, these 3 tips. So one, let's talk about the very first one. And this is really the big struggle point. It's just struggling with what's called imposter syndrome, where you just look around the table and you feel like, I don't deserve to be here. And you have this kind of low level anxiety all the time, waiting for everyone else around the table to figure out he's not supposed to be here, or she's not supposed to be here. Or if you're in a small business setting, if you're growing your business, you're just faking it and you're just waiting for the rest of your team to just walk out the door because like he or she doesn't know what they're doing. And this really pulls at you and struggles at you. And sometimes problems grow in the organization because you don't have the tools or the knowledge to do some of the things that are the harder things. People think leadership is just being in charge, but leadership is a tremendous amount of responsibility. And there's a lot of things you have to do that are great. And there's some perks to it. And there's a lot of things that happen that are challenging and difficult. And, I have a client who I worked with. He was just struggling within his small business with lots of just problems with the employees, lots of challenging things going on between them, hurting morale of the team, kind of bickering, maybe some fighting. And, he just didn't know what to do about it. We had to talk about, how do we start to deal with having these difficult conversations to start turning these things around? And over time, and with the training that I provided and Clear Path Coaching and Consulting provided, we got him to the point where he was able to have some of those conversations. And thanks, Alan. And so once he was having those conversations, it's really been a sea change. And the people who really didn't want to solve this, they ended up leaving the organization, or he helped them leave the organization. And now he's been able to build a better organization. There's a lot more harmony. And when there's more harmony, you're more effective. So there's lots of things you can do. But if you are struggling with this imposter syndrome, you don't know what to do with those things. And so a couple of quick tips, if you find yourself feeling like I don't belong here, one thing that really helped me with my coach was just kind of validating those beliefs to say, are those beliefs really valid? And kind of sitting objectively to say, where are you getting this feedback or this input that you're not good enough? You've got good performance reviews, you've got a good 360. What's driving this for you? And I would come back to things like, well, I don't have the MBA. I don't have the training. I don't know what EBITDA is. I barely know what EBITDA is now. But, another piece of that is what I realized was the reason I was at that table was because I did have a zone of genius and I did have a contribution I brought to the team. And when I was sitting across in New York City up in the Chase Tower in those conversations, I realized one of the values I brought was I had a long-term history and a varied history in the higher education finance space where I was. I had the voice of the customer. I brought a lot of value to that. I was able to get good salespeople into the organization, to grow the organization and have engaged employees. And that's the value I brought to the table. So once I started to realize, man, some of this noise is just in my head and there is a value that I bring to the table. So that's thing one, is kind of work on that mindset of that imposter syndrome or whatever you call it as you're having these thoughts. That's step one towards getting to the place to move from being an accidental executive to a confident leader in your organization. Thing two, educate yourself. This is, the harder part, but there's books you can read, that you don't have to go get the whole MBA, but sometimes, there are programs at colleges like that, that are, financial training for non-financial executives. There's different things you can do. And in this world today, you can go out on Clubhouse and learn things. You can go out on YouTube and pick things up, but also pay attention to what's going on in the business. When you look at those people around you, what are the things that they're focused on? I could tell in the organizations I was in, is what are the metrics that matter? First, metrics matter, and putting together good data, not tons of data, but good solid data that provided information and provided value was important in the organization. So I started looking to see what are those things that I could provide value in. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think this is especially true when people get promoted into those first leadership roles from the individual contributor role. You you just got promoted, right? You are a boss now. You're a leader now. You don't want to go confess to your boss, I don't know what I'm doing. But try and find those places where you can ask for help. Try and find those mentors in the organization where you can. Or if nothing else, take the pulse, pay attention in those business reviews that you attend or the presentations when you happen to go up to kind of a larger level presentation. Within your own business, identify the key metrics leading and lagging that are really going to drive your business. Define how you're going to do the business, but start paying attention to what's important to the leaders that are above you and around you, and start training yourself on how to do some of those things. So that's the second piece of what I would really encourage you to do is you want to transition from accidental executive to competent leader. And then the third piece, and I touched on this a little bit, is find support. This is a big part of the challenge is finding the support. And there's some places if you don't feel comfortable, and I would encourage you to find ways to feel comfortable. And we work with our clients on that, but find ways to get comfortable asking those questions. It's not true that there are no stupid questions. There are some stupid questions, but most of the questions you're going to have aren't stupid. And if you don't want to ask them in a large group, ask them casually to the side. Build the relationships, even if those relationships are lateral to you as opposed to your boss. Find those people who can help you within the organization. If you're the sales guy or you're the operations person and you want to know better some of the financial pieces, talk to kind of your peer on the financial side and say, hey, would you help me kind of work through this number? Just walk me through this. Find those kind of peers that you can provide support to. And guess what? You have valuable information for them as well. So you can create an exchange to do that. If you own your own business, go out and find other business owners. Help hold each other accountable to learning some of these things. Get into some professional organizations in your community that can help you kind of grow and learn on some of these things. But you've really got to find the support. What really ultimately worked for me, and trust me, I read every leadership book known to man. And here's some of the challenge with the leadership books is, I am not, and I just lost his name, the guy who ran Jack Welch. I'm not Jack Welch. I'm not the guy who's going to line three people up and say, fight it out, and that's just not who I was. And trying to emulate those other leaders, that just wasn't natural for me. What ultimately worked for me was coaching, getting an executive coach who helped me find inside myself who I am as a leader and how I can hold people accountable and how I could learn to do some of the things that were a little scary for me to do, but how to practice and get some of those things moving forward. So find that level of support that's going to help you grow and develop in your career. So those are really the key three things that I would share with you today to go from being that accidental executive who feels lost, who doesn't know the right answer, to that confident leader. And this isn't going to happen overnight. We're, in our community, we talk about a lot of these things. You're going to learn these things over time. And I've got some exciting announcements coming up in the next probably 30 to 45 days about other ways that we're going to support people who want to do this. But thanks for the comments, Riley and Alan. I'm really glad to hear that, this is valuable. And I'm sure, Alan, it happens in education. It happens in a lot of careers. We have a tendency to promote strong performers and then just let them sink or swim. And that's not it. We actually create generational problems in our organizations when we don't find ways to develop and help grow our leaders so they can be more effective, make fewer mistakes, and find the solutions faster. So thanks everybody for joining. Again, if you're catching this on the replay, give me a hashtag replay with any questions or comments. Thanks everybody for your time today. Take care. Bye-bye.